Hello, welcome back. This will be our last lesson for solving linear systems. We're going to focus on writing and solving them. So now we're looking at some word problems. Go ahead and take a minute to fill in your table of contents. Our objective today is to be able to write and solve systems of equations from word problems. And our essential question is how do I write and solve linear systems of equations? Alright, so before we begin, hopefully everything we've learned between the solutions and the different types of methods, we can figure out what we're going to use to solve them. So if we're looking at these three different sets of systems of equations, think about what method you would use. Hopefully while looking at the first one here, you would choose substitution. Looking at the second one, hopefully you would choose elimination. And looking at this last one, this would be graphing. Graphing is the least reliable of the three different methods. It's important to know that as we move in when we're solving real-world situations, so we can choose the best method to solve them. Many real-world situations can be solved with a system of equations. To problem solve, follow the following steps. So the first step we want to do is define our variables. That's your let statements. So we went over this when we solved equations. We want to write your systems of equations. So you should always have two equations and two variables. And then we solve using one of the three methods. And then you always make sure you go back and answer the actual question that is being asked. Take a moment to make sure you have all of these steps written down. All right, let's focus on different word problems, see if we can get them set up. A music store sold a total of 27 used trumpets and clarinets in 1 month. Trumpets cost $149 and clarinets cost $99. If total sales were $3,223, how many clarinets did they sell? So one of the things that I always like to do is highlight the actual question, so I know what I'm trying to answer. And there should be two things in the problem that we don't know. So that's actually the number of trumpets and the number of clarinets. That's what we're looking for here. So that's what we need to make our let statement. So we're going to let T equal the number of trumpets. And we need to let C equal the number of clarinets. Your let statement should define the variables that we are trying to figure out. Now, typically each sentence sets up one equation. So sold 27 trumpets and clarinets. So that means if I were to add the number of trumpets and the number of clarinets, I would get 27. So there's our first equation. The number of trumpets plus the number of clarinets. Now we start adding in the next sentence. So the next sentence gives us our second equation. The cost of a trumpet is $149 and the cost of a clarinet is $99. The total sales were $3,223. So the way I set this up is I'm going to multiply the cost of trumpets times the number of trumpets. That would be 149 times T, plus the cost of clarinets, which is 99, times the number of clarinets. And it's going to equal the total sales, which is 3,223. So you can see now I have my two let statements, I've got my two variables, and my two equations. So now we can work on answering the actual question. So we're going to solve that. So thinking about this, what method would work best here? So typically, I am a huge fan of the elimination method, so that's where I would go with this problem. But you could solve for either C or T and use the substitution method as well. But I'm going to go ahead and use the elimination method, and I'm going to multiply the first equation by negative 99 because I'm going to eliminate that smaller number there. So I'm going to get negative 99T minus negative 99C, and then I need to multiply. So you're going to find when we start solving systems of equations, we're probably going to start getting much larger numbers, so it's good to have a calculator handy. So when we multiply that, we're going to get negative 2,673. So now I have what I need to eliminate the clarinets here. It may have been a smarter move to eliminate the trumpets, so I could answer the questions right away, but I'm purposely doing it this way just so you can see the difference. So when we do 149 minus 99, we're going to get 50 trumpets, and now we've got to do 3,223 plus a negative 2,673, or minus 2,673. And that's going to give us 550. And now we divide by 50. So 550 divided by 50 is 11. So that means they sold 11 trumpets. Does that answer our question though? No, it does not. So had we eliminated the trumpets and just used the clarinets, we would have actually gotten our answer right away. I purposely did it that way so you can see that you always need to make sure you are answering the question. So now I'm going to substitute that back into that smaller equation. So I'm really going to have 11 trumpets plus C equals 27, and I need to find the number of clarinets. So 27 minus 11 gives me 16. So they sold 16 clarinets. So when we answer our question here, that's what we're going to say. You should always answer it in a complete sentence. So the store sold 16 clarinets. So always make sure you go back and answer that question. You're going to notice that when I'm solving a word problem, I highlight and scribble through it so much. It's a good idea to do that as well. Let's look at another example here. Aiden has a collection of 63 nickels and quarters in his piggy bank. If the total value of the coins is $10.75, how many nickels does he have? So again, I'm going to highlight the actual question that it's asking me. So we're focusing on nickels. Now I need to pick out the two items that we're looking at in this problem that are going to help me find my let statements and get my variables. So we're looking for nickels and quarters. We don't know how many he has. So we're going to say let Q equal number of quarters. And we're going to let N equal the number of nickels. Now we also know how many he has total of both, so that's 63. So if I add the number of nickels plus the number of quarters, I'm going to get 63 coins in all. So there's my first equation. Now, it says his total coins is $10.75. So that's going to help me set up my next equation. This next sentence is kind of difficult to figure out what to do because you have to actually use the cost of a nickel. So a nickel is worth 5 cents. So that's 0.5. So when we set whenever you have one about money, you got to think about how much that money is worth. And then the quarter is 25 cents. So we multiply how much it's worth by the number that we have. So now we can go ahead and solve this. Again, I'm going to use elimination, but you could solve for one of the variables in the first equation and use substitution. So I want to know how many nickels he has. So to save myself a couple of steps later on, I'm actually going to eliminate the quarters, even though that's not the smaller number. So I'm going to multiply that first equation by a negative 0.25. Because I want to eliminate the quarters so I can just answer the question right away. So I've got negative 0.25 n minus 0.25 q, and then I'm going to have to multiply 63 times 0.25. And that's going to give me a negative 1575. So now we can see we can eliminate the quarters. So all I'm working with now is the nickels. So I'm going to get negative 0.20 and then $10.75 minus $15.75 would be $5. But that's going to be a negative $5. And now we divide by a negative 20 cents. So that's going to turn our problem positive. So you'll see here, we're going to get n equals 25. And n is the number of nickels, which answers our actual question. So we don't actually have to move any further. So we would say Aiden has 25 nickels Also make sure your answer is reasonable. Can you have a half a nickel? So if you got a decimal for this answer, you probably solved it incorrectly because we can't have half of a nickel. If you got a negative, you also probably solved it incorrectly because we're not going to have a negative amount of nickels. That means he's giving them away. He's losing that money. So please make sure that your answer does make sense once you find it. All right, let's look at our next example. Haley and Nicole stopped at the school bookstore for extra supplies. Haley bought 8 pencils and 3 folders. She spent $10.39. Nicole bought 5 pencils and 4 folders and spent $10.51. How much does a folder cost? So I'm going to highlight the actual question. I want to know the cost of a folder. And then I'm going to look for the 2 things that we're trying to figure out. Well, it's going to be pencils and folders. Those are the 2 missing things in this problem. So that's where I'm going to complete my let statements. So let P equal pencils and let F equal folders. Your let statements do not have to be complete sentences, but they do have to define the variables. We have to know what those variables are. You can always use any variables you want. I always use the first letter. of what we're looking for because it just helps me go back and answer the question a little bit easier. So now we're going to use those sentences to set it up. So Haley bought 8 pencils. So that means she's doing 8 times the cost of a pencil. And means I'm going to have a plus sign. 3 folders. So 3 times F. And she spent $10.39. So that's her total. So now I've got another sentence with Nicole. So Nicole bought 5 pencils, so 5 times the cost of pencils, and 4 folders, and she spent $10.51. So there's my 2 equations. So now I'm going to take a look at these and figure out what I need to use to solve that. Well, again, I'm trying to find the cost of folders. So I'm probably going to work on eliminating the pencils to save myself some extra steps. So I need to figure out what the least common multiple is for 8 and 5. And that's going to be 40. So I'm going to multiply by a -5 in the first equation and by 8 in the second equation. So I'm going to get negative 40p minus 15f, and then I'm gonna probably go to my calculator to do 1039 times a -5. We're gonna get 5195. Now I need to multiply that 8. So 8 times 5 is 40, so I'm gonna get that 40p. 8 times 4 is 32. And then I'm probably going to do the calculator again. 8 times 1051. And we'll get 8408. So now we can see we can eliminate those pencils. So I'm going to be able to answer my question correctly. So negative 15 plus 32 gives us 17. Oh, I forgot my negative sign there with the 51. Negative 51 plus 8408 would give us 3213. And then we need to divide by 17. So we're going to get a folder costs $1.89, and that's a reasonable amount. Then we're just going to write it in a sentence here. Remember, if you are confused on anything, please make sure you are writing your questions down. Okay, let's take a look at another example. Here, the length of a rectangular garden is 3 feet less than twice its width. If the perimeter of the garden is 42 feet, what is the length? So, anytime you see something that describes an image, like a rectangle, draw it out. Always, always draw it out. I said this back when we were solving equations. I'm going to say it again. Draw it out. Okay, I'm going to highlight what we're asking for. So we're asking for the length. So I'm going to start by drawing a rectangle so I can set this up. We're going to have our let statements with the length and the width. So I'm going to say let L equal length. Let W equal the width, because those are the two things that are unknown. I'm also going to label them on my rectangle. Now, when I'm looking at this, my first equation is in that first sentence. The length of a rectangle is 3 feet less than twice the width. So we have to create that. So the length is means I have an equal sign. 3 feet less than, remember that comes after when we were setting up expressions, twice its width. So I'm going to have 2w minus 3, twice the width, so 2 times w, and 3 less than that. If the perimeter of the garden is 42 feet, what is the length? So now this should all be familiar to you. It's almost like using substitution, but before we just would write it all out. The idea, though, is we're using substitution to substitute what the length is into our perimeter formula, which is 2L plus 2W equals P. But we can set it up just by combining like terms. So if I just want to combine like terms on each side here, I'm going to get 6W. And then I've also got a minus 6. And it will equal the perimeter of 42. So hopefully this one seems a little bit more like review, but it is a system because we are substituting the length into the equation, but we can cheat a little bit by using our rules of solving equations. So we're going to add 6 on both sides. So we would get 48, divide by 6, and we get 8. So now we need to go up and see if we answered the question. Remember, our question is, what is the length? This here represents the width. So we found the width, we need to find the length. So if we go back to that original equation where it says the length is 2W minus 3, we're going to substitute 8 in. So we're going to do 2 times 8 minus 3. 2 times 8 is 16, minus 3 is 13. And then don't forget your units. So the length is 13 feet. Drawing a picture helps make this much easier, so please take your time to do that. Let's take a look at another example. The local bookstore is having a sale on used books. Nate bought 3 hardcover books and 7 paperback books. He spent $29.50. Tia bought 2 hardcover books and 5 paperback books and spent $20.50. What is the cost of a hardcover book? So hopefully now we've got this down. We can kind of recognize what our variables are going to be. So our 2 things we were talking about, hardcover books and paperback books. So I'd let P equal paperback and let H equal hardcover. We need to find the cost of the hardcover, and we should also recognize where our sentences are that set this up. So our first one is 3 hardcover books, so 3H plus 7 paperback for a total of $29.50. My next one is with Tia. So Tia bought 2 hardcover plus 5 paperback and spent $20.50. Okay, I want to find the hardcover, so I'm probably going to eliminate the paperback. know that's not the smaller numbers, but it's going to save me steps later on. So just to kind of save myself some time, that's what I'm going to do. So I've got 7 and 5. So my least common multiple will be 35. So I'm going to multiply the first equation by -5 and the second equation by 7 to eliminate my variable of p. So I'm going to get -15h minus 35p. And then I'm probably going to go to my calculator. Okay, that's not an easy number to multiply. So 29.50 times a -5 is going to give me -147.5. Now I'm going to do the other equation. So I'm going to get 14h plus 35p. And then I've got to do 2050 times 7, which is 143.5. So now we can see we can eliminate the paperback. So we're already well on our way to answering the question. So I'm going to get a -1h equals -4. And then if I divide by a -1, I'm going to get a +4. So the cost for a hardcover paperback or a hardcover book is $4. Again, we want to make sure we're truly answering that question. Sometimes you might have to find the cost of both. When that happens, you will need to take the answer and plug it back in for the other variable, just like when we've solved them in the past. Let's take a look at one more example. For a 2-day rental at the surf shop, it costs $45 to rent a surfboard and $60 to rent a paddleboard. On a certain weekend, the surf shop rented 44 total surfboards and paddleboards and made $2,265. How many paddleboards were rented? So again, I'm going to highlight the actual question. And hopefully just by reading that, we can recognize that the two things we want to set up a let statement for is the number of surfboards and the number of paddleboards. So there was a total of 44 of these rented. So that means S plus P will equal 44. The number of surfboards plus the number of paddleboards will be a total of 44. Now we're going to use the cost of them. So $45 to rent a surfboard plus $60 to rent a paddleboard, and that's going to equal a total of $2,265. So now I've got my two let statements and I've got my two equations. And I want to figure out how many paddleboards were rented. So that means I am going to eliminate the surfboard. So I'm going to multiply this first equation by a -45. So I'm going to get -45s minus 45p. And I need to multiply 44 times 45, which is 1,980, and that's going to be negative. So our surfboards are eliminated. 60 minus 45 is 15, and then 2,265 minus 1,980 is 285, and then we divide by 15. So the number of paddleboards rented were 19.